Marcus saved for 30 years, never missed a contribution, maxed his employer match every single year, retired at 64 with what looked like a solid nest egg. Derek did the same thing. Same income, same contribution rate, same 30 years. Derek retired with $214,000 more. Same job, same salary, same discipline. One difference, and it had nothing to do with how much either of them saved. Marcus never looked at one number, a number his 401k provider never once brought up in 3 decades, a number that was buried in a document he received once, skimmed, and filed away. And here is the thing, that number was working against Marcus every single month, quietly, legally, with his full signature. We are going to look at exactly what that number is, how it compounds over time, and what it actually costs the average American worker over a 30-year career. Not an estimate, not a range, the actual math. Both Marcus and Derek started at the same place. Age 35, salary of $72,000, contributing 10% of their income annually, employer matching 4%, same index fund allocation, same market returns. One of them knew something the other didn't. Let's start with what Marcus saw on his statement every quarter. His balance was growing. Every year, the number went up. Year 1, $8,400 in contributions plus match, plus market growth. Year 5, balance sitting just over $58,000. Year 10, crossing $140,000. On paper, everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. And that's the thing about a growing number. It feels like proof that everything is fine. His provider sent quarterly statements. The balance went up. The market dipped sometimes, recovered, kept climbing. Marcus felt responsible. He felt like he had figured out the retirement game. He hadn't looked at his expense ratio since the enrollment paperwork in 2001. Here's what an expense ratio is, because this is the number that matters. An expense ratio is an annual fee charged by your fund, expressed as a percentage of your total balance. Not a flat fee, a percentage, every single year, taken directly from your returns before you ever see them. Marcus's fund had an expense ratio of 1.02%. That sounds small. We'll come back to what it actually means. But first, Derek, same age, same salary, same employer. Derek spent about 45 minutes during his enrollment comparing the funds available in his 401k plan. He found a total market index fund with an expense ratio of 0.03%, 1.02% versus 0.03%. Looks like a rounding error. It is not. Now let's look at the actual numbers. The average 401k plan in the United States offers between 8 and 30 fund options. According to a 2023 report from the Investment Company Institute, the average expense ratio across actively managed funds in employer plans sits at roughly 0.71%. Some funds go well above 1%. Some target date funds embedded in default enrollment options carry ratios between 0.6% and 1.1%. The lowest cost index funds, available in most plans, sit between 0.01% and 0.05%. That gap is not an accident. Here is how the math works on Marcus's 1.02% fee over 30 years. Starting balance, $0. Annual contribution including employer match, $10,224. Assumed average annual market return before fees, 7%. Duration, 30 years. At 7% gross return with a 1.02% expense ratio, Marcus's effective annual return is approximately 5.98%. After 30 years, Marcus's balance, roughly $810,000. Now run the same numbers for Derek. Same contributions, same gross return, but his expense ratio is 0.03%, giving him an effective return of approximately 6.97%. Derek's balance after 30 years, approximately $1,024,000. Pause. The difference is $214,000. Not because Derek earned more. Not because Derek saved more. Not because Derek got lucky in the market. Because Derek paid 0.03% instead of 1.02%. That is what a 0.99% difference in annual fees does over 30 years of compounding. It removes $214,000 from the end of your retirement. And Marcus's provider never brought it up once. Here's what nobody talks about. The fee is not taken from a separate account. It is not a line item on your statement. It is subtracted from your returns before your balance is calculated. You never see it leave. You only see a slightly smaller number than you would have had, and since you have no reference point for what the number should have been, you assume everything is normal. This is called fee opacity, and it is entirely legal. According to the Department of Labor's 2012 Fee Disclosure Rule, 401k providers are required to disclose fund expense ratios. They do. It is in your plan documents. It is on the fund fact sheets. It is technically available to you at any time, but it is never shown on your quarterly statement next to your balance. You are told your balance. You are not told what your balance would have been. That distinction is worth $214,000 to Marcus. Now, 1.02% is not the worst case. Let's talk about what happens at the higher end, because some plans, particularly those offered through smaller employers with fewer negotiating options, carry fund options averaging 1.3%, 1.5%, even above 1.7%. At 1.5% expense ratio, same $10,224 annual contribution, same 7% gross return, 30 years, the ending balance drops to approximately $762,000. That is a $262,000 difference from a low-cost alternative. At 1.7%, the ending balance falls to around $736,000, a difference of $288,000. This is not theoretical. These fund options exist in active 401k plans right now. Millions of Americans are enrolled in them today. Many of them have no idea. But that's not even the biggest number. That comes next. Let's talk about what happens to that $214,000 after retirement. Most people think about the accumulation phase, the 30 years of building. What they don't account for is the distribution phase, the 20 to 30 years of spending. Marcus retires with $810,000. Derek retires with $1,024,000. If both withdraw at the commonly recommended 4% annual rate, the withdrawal rate supported by the Trinity study published by researchers at Trinity University, Marcus takes out $32,400 per year. Derek takes out $40,960 per year. That is an $8,560 annual difference in retirement income. Over a 25-year retirement, that gap in annual withdrawals represents $214,000 in total spending power, which is, not coincidentally, exactly the amount lost to fees during accumulation. But it is actually worse than that, because Derek's larger balance continues to compound in retirement. His money lasts longer. His buffer against inflation is larger. His ability to handle an unexpected medical expense, which, according to Fidelity's 2023 retiree healthcare cost estimate, averages $157,500 per person after age 65, is meaningfully stronger. The fee doesn't just cost Marcus at retirement. It costs him for the rest of his life. There is one more thing nobody likes to talk about. Your employer chose your plan, and your employer may not have chosen it based primarily on what was best for you. 401k plans are sold by providers to employers. The employer selects which funds are available. The selection process involves plan administration costs, which are sometimes partially or fully offset by higher fund expense ratios, what the industry calls revenue sharing or sub-TA fees. In plain language, in some plans, the higher the expense ratio on the funds available to you, the lower the administration cost to your employer. This is disclosed. It is buried in plan documents that most employees never read. It does not mean your employer is acting in bad faith. It means there is a structural misalignment between who pays for plan administration and who bears the cost of fund fees. According to a 2020 study published in the Journal of Finance, plans with higher revenue-sharing arrangements systematically offer higher-cost funds to employees, not as a conspiracy, but as a natural outcome of how plan economics are structured. Your 401k provider is not your financial advisor. They are a vendor, and like any vendor, they are running a business. Knowing that does not make you cynical. It makes you informed. Now let's Steelman the other side, because the argument for actively managed funds, which carry the higher fees, is not nothing. Proponents argue that active funds can outperform index funds, particularly in volatile markets. A skilled manager, the argument goes, can reduce downside risk and generate alpha, returns above what the market would otherwise provide. And in certain years, in certain conditions, some active funds do outperform. That is true. But here is what the data shows over long periods. According to the S&P SPIVA report, the Standard & Poor's Indices versus Active report published semi-annually, over any 15-year period, approximately 88% of actively managed U.S. equity funds underperform their benchmark index after fees. Not 50%, not 60%, 88%. The 12% that do outperform are not consistently identifiable in advance. Past outperformance does not reliably predict future outperformance. This is not a controversial claim in academic finance. It is settled empirical evidence replicated across decades of data. So the case for paying 1.02% instead of 0.03% requires believing your fund is in that 12% and that it will stay there for 30 years. That is a bet Marcus made without knowing he was making it. So what does Derek actually know that Marcus didn't? 3 things: specific, simple, actionable. First, the expense ratio of every fund you are currently enrolled in. You can find this on your plan's fund fact sheet, on Morningstar's free database, or by searching the fund's ticker symbol followed by expense ratio. If your current fund charges above 0.2%, you have options worth exploring. Second, whether your plan offers a low-cost index fund alternative. According to the Investment Company Institute's 2023 data, 83% of 401k plans now include at least one index fund option. Most workers have access to a lower-cost alternative and do not know it. Log into your plan. Look at the full fund menu. Sort by expense ratio. Third, the difference between expense ratio and other fees. Some plans also charge administrative fees, record-keeping fees, or individual service fees. These appear on your annual fee disclosure notice, a document your plan is legally required to provide every year. It may arrive as a standalone mailing or be buried in your annual enrollment packet. Find it. Read the fee table specifically. None of this requires switching providers. None of this requires leaving your employer's plan. It requires one conversation with your HR department or 1 hour inside your existing account. Let's close the loop on Marcus and Derek. Marcus, at 64, had $810,000, a number he was proud of, a number that felt like vindication of 30 years of discipline. What he didn't know was that his discipline had been working against a headwind the entire time. A 1.02% headwind every year, compounding in reverse. Derek had the same discipline. He just removed the headwind. $214,000 is not the product of superior investing. It is not the product of taking more risk or finding a better market opportunity. It is the product of reading one number on one document during enrollment and choosing a different fund. That is it. Here is the transferable principle, not just from this story, but from the math. In investing, costs are the one variable you control completely. You cannot control what the market returns. You cannot control inflation. You cannot control interest rates. But you can control what you pay. And in a compounding system, what you pay compounds too, just in the wrong direction. Low costs do not guarantee good returns, but high costs guarantee lower ones. Ask yourself this. Do you know the expense ratio of every fund inside your 401k right now? Not approximately. Exactly. If the answer is no, that is the only thing worth changing this week. If you want to understand the next hidden layer inside your retirement accounts, the one most people discover too late, the next video covers what your 401k statement is still not showing you, even after you fix the fees.